stress depends on the causes and the...
With regards to water released from the Lado Dam, and each time we get any news, like breaking news in Nigeria, we get in touch. When we called last about 2 days ago, the officer in charge of the Northern Cameroon, province of Cameroon, the infrastructure development, and assured us that the dam is still impounding water. That even that the ambassador to Nigeria called after seeing an breaking news in Nigeria, how to call before my call came, that they are still impounding water. But from what he painted, is a little bit gloomy. He said the water level at the dam, Lado Dam, is about 2.1 meters. But once you get to 2.6, they will start spilling. Now, at what time will it get to that point is dependent upon the amount of rainfall upstream. Like I mentioned, our agency, in our press release, mentioned the 12 states that lie within the banks of rivers Niger and Benue. And unfortunately, it is coming to the prediction we made, going by the figures we are getting, using Lokoja as a sample. Like as of today, the level of water downstream the confluence in Lokoja is about 1.09 meters, higher than what it was the same 14th of September 2012. 1.09 meters higher than the figure of 14th of September 2012. So you can begin to visualize what the picture is in case Cameroon releases water.
All right, sir. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm sorry. There are other locations. Anambra, for instance. I mean, people will be wondering why Anambra would appear also to be impacted. We know Edo has a tributary of the River Niger around the Agenibodo area and so on and so forth. But Anambra has also come under flooding, as it were.
Yes, Anambra State
is inside the river in Niger.
Well, of course, I know the river on the area.
Yes.
Other than
and the other rivers. And
for instance,
river.
just like the Professor Danu mentioned about I think River Gongola. By the time River Niger is overwhelmed at Onitsha, somewhere, Idemili River will flow back as it has been
Omambala River too.
Kirian, you are from Enugu.
You are talking I'm from the southeast of Nigeria because I know the area he's talking about.
Yes.
And why is the first Anambra is what we're trying to get at. Because we have other rivers.
Yes.
Omambala River is there. The one he mentioned shortly is there. River Niger is the Idemili River. And they all have the kind of connectivity. Right. So when one overflows, it's to get to the rest of them.
It goes back.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the important thing here is to ensure that Nigerians know the very day Lado Dam, water in the Lado Dam will be released so that people will be prepared for it. All right, now let's turn to the emergency personnel that we have here. We have the Acting Director of Relief and Rehabilitation, National Emergency Management Agency, Kayode Fabemi. Now, Kayode, yes, NEMA's read aloud to the military. Is it for lack of requisite response strategy or for reinforcement? Of course, you listened to the Commissioner for Environment from Kogi State who said already that there's an emergency situation in Kogi State.
Yeah, thank you very much. For your information and information of Nigeria, the military is part of the strategic response to disaster in Nigeria. We, by our blueprint, we have a director, search and rescue, who is a serving military officer. So the present person is an air commander. So what we do is that he allows liaising with the defense headquarters. So when we got the information, the alert from NISA on the 6th, in fact, it was around 8 p.m. After 8 p.m., we got the information. We called for an emergency meeting on the 7th, that was Friday. And we called all the stakeholders. The military was present. We called NOA, we called NISA, and NIMET, and everybody. And we quickly started, to activate our contingency plan. And we formed 6 teams to go out. The Kogi State Commissioner had just confirmed. We had 6 teams to go out to all the 12 states. So a team is already in Kogi and Anambra State. And what I did to do, to work with the State Emergency Management Agency to identify places where people can be evacuated, to warn people who may not want to leave. You know, so many people did not want to leave initially, but when they saw people from the headquarters, from NEMA, they quickly went. And we are working with the military, as you said. The military, the Navy, we have a naval base in Lokoja. They are ready to help us, the Air Force. We have what we call disaster response unit in the military. So all of them now have been, put on the red alert to be activated immediately to support disaster management. Because we know that the military has a lot of assets that can be used. It's all over the world, you can see that of Hurricane Florence and all that, So we have put them on an alert, and it's part of our preparedness to ensure that they are activated and used immediately. And
what then happened in Niger?
Okay, Niger State. The Niger State is critical because they have the 3 major dams. They have the Kanji Dam, Jeba Dam, and Shiroro Dam. Okay, so we sent also, but because many of them, as I said, are fishermen, and they on the floodplain, and the sensitization and awareness campaign was there early enough, but they are thinking, oh, it may not come. There's something we call early warning, the human aspect of early warning. You give an early warning and it didn't come, and so when you hear the early warning again, you are reluctant in moving out. That's exactly what happened in Niger State. The SEMA themselves, the State Emergency Management, have been working with us and having jingles, but some now have been moved. By when our team got there, they have camps now. They have camps already, and many have been evacuated. They are already there. Yeah,
but they said there were at least 20-something persons who lost their lives. How come they were not rescued, or they couldn't be rescued?
Rescuing people is dependent on where they are, because these people are very close to the bank of the river, and so maybe the flood comes in the night. You are not even able to call in a rescue operation. That's what may have happened. You remember also in Gibea, about 50 people died. In Abeokuta, a few people died and all that. So these are some of the things that happened. That's why we say people should evacuate. And we are glad that they have listened now. They are now leaving their property, and some carry. If you see the situation in Kogi State, for instance, some of the photos we saw this morning, they are all moving away. They have refused in the past 1 week or 2 weeks to go, but now they are seeing the reality. Yeah, they are moving.
All right, thank you. Omar Shoibu is the coordinator of Abuja Metropolitan Management Council. What's your take in all of this? Abuja sometimes is flooded. Since this year, we have witnessed some flooding in Abuja, and I guess maybe perhaps 1 or 2 persons lost their lives or something. So lead us into this. What is the situation in Abuja Metropolis?
Well, the situation in Abuja Metropolis is such that initially in the FCT, when we are planning where people should live, we take into cognizance 100 years flood regime. All these streams in Abuja, we made this calculation. And if within 100 years there is likelihood of a flood to occur from a certain river, we earmark a place where it is not allowed for people to start developing their houses within those places. So the problem that we are encountering now is our failure to plan. And if you fail to plan, we are planning to fail. So most of the rivers within the city center, as you can see, we don't have flooding within the city where there are adequate planning, but it is where there are they are not yet planned.
Sorry, Mr. Shoibu, I'm not cutting you short, please. Area 8, Area 3, Gwarimpa, these are places you see flooded when rain falls. I don't know what
Yes, what I'm saying is that you don't have loss of lives, because where there is flooding, we make sure that people do not develop in those areas. So you have loss of lives are places outside the city where they are not planned. That just yesterday we visited a community, somewhere down, we call it Kobe community, where people develop on floodplains. You can't develop on floodplains. Our problem is people are not respecting our regulations. When you say do not develop here, do not develop there, they will think that you are trying to make things difficult for them, not knowing that we are trying to save their lives. If we respect our plan, all these things will not have happened. Not only on rivers, we have drainages in the city. Whatever is happening now, not only on the rivers where you have rivers, but the torrential rainfall, we know it is going to occur. And you know we have the phenomenon of global warming. If floods occur previously for just within 10 years, now it has been reducing. Take an example what happened in River Niger, Alalokoja area, 2012. It has not happened before. From 2012 to now, it's just a matter of 6 years. And it is now happening now. So the phenomenon of global warming is one that is escalating all these things. If it has been occurring 50 years before, it is between 40 years, 30 years, and now within 5, 6 years. So the most important thing, let's plan and know where we are going to build our houses. If we do not know that, we're thinking of evacuation. If people are not living there, there's no need of saying you are evacuating people. The most important thing, people's lives.
I'm wondering, Omar Shuaibu, you are a town planner, and looking at what is happening in some parts of the country, the impression is created that these are disasters that are virtually man-made on account of the lack of respect for town planning laws. Town planners have an association, I believe. How is it that town planners appear not to be sufficiently vocal enough in warning about these disasters and therefore the need to enforce planning regulations in whatever part of the country, urban or rural, to avert these disasters that have now become almost yearly?
The problem is not that we are not talking. Like in Abuja, on several occasions, you see that we put up advertorials and TV information, people should not do this, should not do that. But it takes the people themselves to respect and be abiding by whatever you tell them not to do. It takes two things. Yes, we have the authority regulating and the people that are respecting the regulations. If the authority are talking, they are regulating, people are not respecting, there will be a problem. So it is the people that should respect whatever law that is placed. And they should respect whatever regulation that say, do not do this and do not do that.
Okay, thank you, thank you. We'll come back to you. Let's go over now to Adamawa. That's where we have Omar Biendo, the Secretary to the Government of that state. Omar Biendo, I hope you can hear me clearly. Now, what are the plans in place to relocate people who are in flood-prone areas? As you have heard from Mr. Nze, excess water from Lado Dam is yet to be released. And where that happens, Adamawa may have its own share of it. So what plans does the government have to relocate people now that it has not happened?
Thank you very much, Kieran, for this question. I will start by literally saying at the national level, I think our country is demonstrating a very serious weakness. Weakness in the sense that this thing is beginning to become a culture. Every year, at every time, despite all these institutions and the knowledge that we claim we have, it will happen. People who live in these areas know that it will happen. People who are monitoring our hydrological and weather systems know that it's going to happen. And every time we go through this cycle of flooding, villages being taken over by water, and so on and so forth. And we never ever see the opportunity in this particular weakness. If you look at all the flood water, it's very brownish and darkish and brackish. This is an indication that water that is coming into these areas is full of nutrients, is full of sedimentation that could be an advantage to agriculture. But in our country, you never hear of canals. You never hear of lakes that are created to enhance agriculture. You never hear of flat land that is sort of literally structured with physical infrastructure in terms of hydrology to make sure that grasses are growing for herdsmen and so on and so forth. It's always this river over-flooded and communities near the river is overtaken, and then we scream and cry, and then it all goes round and round and round again. So for in Adamawa State, yes, we're part of it. Our number one problem is that when you look at all the NIMET and all the hydrological services, as the director said, they report on the basis of their observations in Lokoja. By the time you see the rises of water in Lokoja, Adamawa is already flooded, and we're already in emergency. That means the observation, the transmission of information system is faulty as far as we are concerned. And we're left with, on the platform of four strategies where you need to do immediate things, you need to have short-term things, you need to have medium-term things, and you need to have long-term things. Immediately, basically, we are just left with humanitarian. We're evacuating people. We run immediately. We see rain or water of the River Benue sort of like getting off the edges. We now very, very quickly, we have a very efficient Commissioner of Information and Information System, at least by talking and telling people. We are probably the only state that has the names, telephone numbers of every single traditional leader at every level. And we communicate with these people to say, look, if you want to run for your life and bits of your property, you better start now. And a lot of people respond by escaping before the water takes off. But on the short-term things, we are now enacting laws, just like the FCT the director said. Our planners are now trying to identify in all the local governments that are heavily prone to these areas to be able to set up laws. When laws are there and you are not arresting people or implementing these laws, it has no effect. And I hope in the future, when you ask me this question, I can be able to tell you that in addition to rescuing so many people have also been arrested because of their irresponsibility to go and build their houses, to go and put their farms on areas that are considered dangerous. This is literally suicide. On the medium-term thing, the federal government must be very serious with the Cameroon system. Lagdo Dam cannot continue opening their spillways to flood everywhere, every single year. We cannot set up a policy of just communicating with Cameroon. The responsibility is that this government must review the agreements when this dam was established. It seems if you go through the agreement, everything is an advantage to Nigeria. They have their dam, they probably are generating electricity, they have a lot of water to one or two things, but it is always Nigeria that, when the spillways are open, are facing with disaster. So we need to bring this on the table, whether it's ECOWAS or some kind of international or just bilateral. We need to review this to make sure that something more concrete protects the Nigerians. On the long term, River Benue has to be dredged, because literally this is just basic common sense. All the sedimentation, a characteristics of Nigerian rivers and waterways, that they carry logs of wood and boulders and soil and everything. As they move, they slow down and they deposit this. The riverbed of River Benue has gone so up that literally the riverbed and the areas where people are living are at the same level, and water will find its own level. And therefore, when just a little bit of water, the whole thing will spread and even catch up with the land, places that you never thought. So dredging is very, very seriously an agenda that has to be done. Yes, the agency that is to do with NIWA is concentrating of digging up and dredging rivers for transportation, but we have to think of, it's literally a river is like a bucket. If it is deep, it will contain more water. If it is shallow, if you put a lot of water, it will spill. And therefore, there has to be a national agenda. The hydrological agency must also behave like a real knowledge institution, not just like a humanitarian institution. It's not just about information. It's about strategizing. Where do you need canals? Where do we need to move water to enhance our agriculture? Where do you need to move water to create artificial or inland lakes so that we are treating the water, feeding people with potable water and using it for agriculture? These are some of the medium to long-term things. However, finally, in Adamawa, we're doing our very best. The government and the governor is doing very, very well in time to reach out to the communities, take people out, we are now more or less used to the creation of internally displaced person centers, having experienced from the insurgency effect. So there's no other way than you close some schools, or if they're on holiday, you move people there temporarily. You work with NEMA and ATSEMA to get food and so on and so forth, and you just continue tackling these temporary and short-term things. But the solution is the medium to long-term things. Federal government has its own responsibility, and it must take it religiously, renegotiate this agreement with Cameroon, dredge the River Benue, and then get the institution. I mean, how can you have nearly 200 universities in Nigeria and there are no people to manage water, killing people and destroying it? We have to reposition ourselves to make sure that we take advantage that these flooding waters present. That's my opinion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Umar Bindrin, Secretary to the Adamawa State Government. We'll still pause you in the meantime, and indeed the other guests, you'll raise some points. We'll give Professor Adanu and Engineer Clement the opportunity of responding to the propositions that you have made, but that will be after this short break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Won't kill you. Move now.
To they disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say I no go dey do am again, because change begins with me.
Let's cross the other side of the road.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me fast where they go.
Make her they stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go they stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Now you are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA, and our topic remains the flood and the flooding across the nation. Now let's return to Professor Adanu. Professor Adanu, you listened to Dr. Umar Bindel, the Secretary to the government of Adamawa State, and he did raise some pertinent issues, some of which include the issue of dredging to create more space for water in our rivers. Another is that of creating artificial lake, that could also be useful for agriculture. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Before I respond to that, I want to thank NTA for constantly bringing this thing to the knowledge of Nigerians every year. Now, a lot of people come with ideas, a lot of people come also with their experiences, and then we put them together. But have we assessed and summarized them effectively for government to take action? Engineer Nze said something when he was talking, but a lot of you overlooked it. He said downstream of Lokoja, the stage, that's the water level, is already as high, or if not higher than what we experienced in 2012. Now, that clearly removes Labdo Dam from any culpability. Because at that time they were saying Labdo Dam was releasing this. Now we should think about the internally generated water resources within our segments in Nigeria. The Anambra Imo area there, with other rivers there, having their sources from around the Udi Plateau and all this, have a lot of water that can flood the environment if rainfall is very high. So we should know that. We have the same thing in other areas. Adamawa, flooding is there now, and they are telling us Labdo has not already filled up. They are still impounding. They have not released water. But they were experiencing flooding. Because we have other areas that generate high level of water, highly resourceful watersheds that provide water internally in Nigeria to cause flooding if rainfall is very consistent. So we should look at that too. Now, the Secretary to Government of Adamawa was very passionate about what he was saying, and it's true. Now, have we benefited from flooding? Do we look at flood as a positive action, natural event? We haven't looked at it that way. Now, Labdo Dam, he is talking of maybe an MOU, an agreement between Nigeria and Cameroon on Labdo Dam. We have a riparian law that provides for such actions and also events that may happen to downstream riparian states in a system, a river system. Now, when Labdo was going to be constructed, Nigeria at the same time was to construct the Adasin Hausa in Adamawa there. It's about 30 kilometers upstream of Yola to be constructed. And the reason for that was to take enough water from Labdo and also manage and operate the excess water effectively. The intention at the time was to also have navigation all the way down to the Niger Delta. And in doing that, what was intended to do is to make sure that the River Benue Valley is properly restructured and trained such that navigational actions can take place all the way down. Now, the Dasin House Dam in Nigeria is supposed to contain all the waters coming from Cameroon. Cameroon just produces about 11 billion cubic meters of water and sending to us. This is inclusive of the Labdo Dam that's about 6 billion cubic meters. The Dasin House Dam downstream, it was supposed to be 16 billion, which means it can take all the water from Cameroon, including the water from Labdo Dam, and manage and operate it effectively. Now, this is not done. Any agreement you are going to go into now is just a riparian agreement. And the riparian law says that anybody upstream should send about 25% of the water that flows downstream to make sure that water is available for the people downstream of such environment, including, of course, the quality of water. You should not degrade your water sufficiently. Now, what do we do with this flood water? It's going to keep coming. What do we do with it? That is a problem. But I believe that if we because everybody in the studio today is very knowledgeable, and everything they've said today, I think is cogent, and it responds very well to our demands and also our experiences. Have we been able to put this thing down sufficiently for government to take action? Or has it been sufficient and government is not ready to take action on that? The Dasin Hausa Dam, whether we like it or not, is hanging on us. We must find money one day to do it. Otherwise, the whole of that River Benue that we're talking about and all this will be in trouble. Now, dredging. I am not too much concerned about just dredging components of a river. A river system has its origin. In 1979, I remember, I was carrying out a research on River Benue on the sediment migration. And all the pebbles that I found around Abinse in Benue State and Gasha area were derived from the Cameroon mountains. So if you are going to dredge a component of a river, please be sure that you know where your sediments are coming from. Where you have dredged, if it's just a segment, you should be able to prevent that segment from accepting sediments coming from upstream. And you must know how to manage the sediments that are coming. If we are going to dredge River Benue, let's look at all this system. the characteristics of the river, the sediments derived, their age, the travel time. It is difficult for the sand. We know the origin of the pebbles in the river coming from Cameroon mountains, but the sand is also a problem. Now, the sand in Benue, River Benue, or the Benue Valley, is also part of the transgression of the Atlantic some millions of years back. So those spent sediments are there. But as for the boulders that come, or pebbles that come down there, they come all the way from. So if we are going to dredge any system like that, you must know the true nature of the action and activities of the river and all the sediments that are produced in the system. He made mention of a lot of sediments being conveyed down there. Yeah, it's true. Some of them are nutrients, but when they're deposited anywhere, we should know how to use that. So as he mentioned, if we can track these sediments very well, track our flood, and make use of them, you know, we can do it. Let me tell you, we can do it, and we need to do it. Thank you.
All right, Professor Emmanuel Adano, thank you very much from our Kaduna Network studios. Let's bring in now Engineer Clement. Engineer Clement, you listen to what Dr. Umar Brindri said from Adamawa via Skype and Professor Adano right away on how, for instance, we should, as a nation, seek to benefit more from flood waters rather than bemoaning the annual disasters that we have on our hands, because the floods just sweep away everything in their path. They have more canals, they have more artificial lakes, and so on and so forth. I know Bakalore Dam, for instance, has a network of several kilometers of canals and all of that. So what is your response to that proposition? That's one. And second point, which perhaps you may wish to take first, is are we really now out of the woods in terms of the amount of rainfall to expect, bearing in mind that the Cameroonian authorities haven't yet released water? Because if you look at the map of flooding disaster in the country this year, Kebbi State, for instance, I mean, there was a military officer who lost his life trying to rescue a woman from flood. That was in Kebbi. Niger has been impacted. Kogi, of course, is right there. Edo is suffering. Anambra is suffering. And several other locations. So is this the worst peak that we should expect before the Cameroonian authorities release water from the Lagdo Dam? Plus, how then do we channel flood waters for more productive economic activities?
Okay, thank you so much. I will say, honestly, we are not yet out of the woods in terms of flooding. In 2012, the highest peak of flooding incident that took place on the 29th of September, which is, as of today, about 2 weeks away. And the height we recorded was 12.84 meters on September 29th, 2012. And then going by the NIMET's prediction, seasonal prediction for 2018, they said that the earliest cessation date of rainfall in Sokoto and Katsina is 28th of September, plus or minus 5 days. And then in the southern part, that the earliest time the rainfall will cease, the southern coastlines, will be December. With this picture in mind, and also going by what happened in 2012, we can deduce that we cannot yet say, Uhuru, that we are away from the flooding season. So this calls for caution. That's why we, in our NISAS release, periodic release, we say that every other indices have been manifested. That is for that. Therefore, we keep saying that the states that are that are contiguous to Rivers Niger and Benue should still be watchful. And then, going back to the SSG's comment, we monitor the entire country, not only Lokoja. We have our monitoring stations. A lot of them are in Adamawa and Taraba states. We have we have in Kasenala River. We have in Donga. We have in Gasol. Most of these places are within Adamawa and Taraba states. We have one in Uroboki. Uroboki is the first measuring point. Our agency has a station as soon as River Benue enters Nigeria. That's our first point we measure. And it is critical to our analysis. As at today, the level of water at Uroboki in Adamawa State is still less than that of 2012 at the corresponding date. Now, just like Professor Adanu mentioned, there are a lot of tributaries of River Benue that are very productive downstream of Lagdo Dam in Cameroon. Within the Cameroon portion, you have Mayokebi River, you have Faro River, very active, flowing into River Benue, downstream of the Lagdo Dam. And then within the Nigerian axis, you have Donga, Kasenala, Gongola, a lot of them. Now, the best that could be done to reduce the inflow into River Benue is to put dams within these tributaries. That of that's a Hausa dam that is over or about 15 billion cubic meters that is still on the drawing board could be kept in abeyance and then put smaller dams on these rivers so as to be collecting the inflow into River Benue. With that, like Professor Donald mentioned too, like the Kasibila Dam, if there is a proper operation of dam operation, that dam built mainly to checkmate whatever could happen in Lake Nyos in Cameroon, it could have been emptied by now. So that at the peak of rainy season, July, August, September, what we call just month, you begin to monitor it and then to block. Like he mentioned also, 27% of the volume of Benue is contributed by River Kasenala. So if such has been done, it will go a long way to regulate the amount of water that enters into River Benue. Then concerning the relationship between Nigeria and Cameroon, there is a subsisting memorandum of understanding, specifically for the management of the water resources potential of the River Benue Valley. Cameroonian authority is bound to inform Nigeria ahead of time in case they want to release water. But then we are at their mercy. If they inform us, what do we do? We don't have any dam to trap whatever is coming from Cameroon.
All right, thank you. Kingsley, from all indications and from submissions of our guests, you can see that the technicality of ensuring that flood water could be positively utilized for other forms of development, especially farming, is very complex and demands high level of technology. I hope I'm right there. You are the professionals, but from what you have told us this morning, it's not just a child's play. And before we go to the tweets now, because Nigerians are beginning to respond to our conversation, let's return to Commissioner for Environment in Kogi State. Of course, because this is a humanitarian issue now. What is being done now by the state government? That is because of what you have called for national emergency, what are you doing at present? Because we have said that Lokoja is the epicenter and it may occur.
Yes. As a state, the government of His Excellency Alhaji Bello has responded within the available resources, of course, to evacuate people into the created temporary shelters. But of course, we are faced with, insufficient, public places that we can keep these people. And sometimes we have to resort to use of schools, and which will disrupt schooling. And in that case, we will want the federal government and other NGOs and other public spirited individuals and corporate organizations to come in to support us with temporary shelter in the form of tent. Because if we are able to, have those, tents, on open ground, then we can take in a lot of people. As we speak, thousands of people that are displaced are taking shelter with, relatives, friends, and we tend to focus on those in the camps. But there are thousands of people that are, displaced and living with.
After the 2012 floods, the Dangote Committee was set up by the Jonathan administration. And part of what that committee did was to construct housing accommodation in some parts of Lokoja. Perhaps those houses have been taken up now by individuals. But what has the state government done, bearing in mind that one of the issues that arose from the flooding of 2012, and I'm sure you have also experienced that now, has been the reluctance, the unwillingness of persons whose livelihoods depend, on activities around the banks of the confluence area to actually relocate, dangers notwithstanding.
Yes, following the event of 2012 flood, like you rightly mentioned, the investment in providing accommodation to relocate people on the floodplain or around the riverbanks was done, and that's why in Lokoja in particular we have the flood estate, and right there we equally have the IDP hostel that has been being constructed, because it's almost 50%, but it's yet to be completed.
All right, thanks a lot. We will take the tweets. Probably just to help us lead to the close of the conversation. But let's bring in the NEMA, the acting director. What is your assessment of the readiness of states to be first responders to disasters occurring as a result of flooding? How ready are they?
Yeah, actually, in our disaster management circle, the state is the weak link. Many of them have state emergency management agencies, but they have no capacity. And we've been trying to build capacity. You are aware that some states are even finding it difficult to pay salary, so they cannot equip and do many things for the state emergency management agency. But we are supporting them. Today, food items and non-food items will be leaving for Kogi State, for instance, and we are trying to purchase irrigation pumps so that farmers that lost their crops can do irrigation, farming when the floods are gone. We are trying to get fishing nets, so that they can, get some money back, because they are going to lose a lot of their crops. So we are the state. When we asked them, we had state, we had stakeholders meeting and asked for their preparedness. How ready they are? They say, "Oh, we are ready," but we know they are not ready. So we know, and also the federal. We want to thank the federal government for supporting NEMA. We are all over the state, all over everywhere. And as I said, we send our team out, and it's not only NEMA staff, including staff from NISA, from NIMED, from all other agencies, to all the states to do awareness campaign.
All right, thank you. Before the tweets, let's also just conclude this conversation by returning to Omar Shoaibu. Omar, is Abuja ready for any emergency?
You see, the readiness entails on the level of planning. You see, you have to plan this in advance, not a matter of only 6 months.
Has it been planned?
Of course, Abuja has been planned to contain all this, to contain all possible occurrence of fraud. You can never stop urban flooding. That is natural. But you must plan against its occurrence. That's why we have a plan of this development should be here, this development should be there. Land use planning is very, very important in this matter. There are developments that you cannot prove. You cannot prove where the areas are close to even to where substitute flooding, like gas stations and all that have you. But what I will strongly advocate for planners all over the country is to demarcate all these flood-prone areas, all the rivers, not only the major ones, the smaller streams themselves. Because whenever there is flooding, the small stream that we feel like is just a seasonal stream that dries every year, it flows, you see the volume has grown to a very big river. So let there be demarcation of all these flood-prone areas, and then sensitization of preventing people from development on all these flood-prone areas. Prevention is better than cure.
Yeah. All right, Omar, thank you very much. Let's go over now to the tweets that we have. Sani Omar Kasina has this tweet, says, flooding is disastrous. Many people lost their shelter and all that they have. Government should not allow people to build houses with no drainage system or building houses where, which is, you know, a water corridor. I think that we can help prevent the consequences of flooding.
Now, Ike Anyako says the menace of flood in Nigeria is very unfortunate. More worrisome is that billions of naira have been channeled to address flood by both federal government and foreign donor agencies, all to no avail. Most of these funds, unfortunately, end up in private pockets without any job done. That's by Ike Anyako there.
And then that's another one from Mike Anyako. He says, Anambra is one of the worst hit by erosion. Now, we need to appreciate the havoc erosion had rendered communities, a state of hopelessness, destruction of homes and farmlands.
All right, from Elias Nuhu, if we want to avoid the reoccurrence of flood, the government has to make sure that the Cameroon Dam is delayed or diverted, or else the 2012 flood disaster will be experienced once again.
Sani Makalomakoji. While many Nigerians empathize with the victims of the current flood disaster, some officials are taking advantage of this ugly situation as they are busy diverting donations from NGOs and corporate bodies for their personal gain. The diverted bailout funds are now flood donations.
Omobola says, climate change conference of 2017, where Nigeria was a partaker, may have provided some clues on how to tackle this perennial menace. We know what to do. All that's required is responsive leadership with political will across all levels. But he also should understand that there's flood even in the US, UK, and what have you.
That's we've seen that in Japan. We've seen disasters in India. Yeah. We've seen in other parts of Europe as well. Suleiman Babagana has this tweet: state and local emergency management agencies should re-strategize for them to live up to their task, not leaving everything to NEMA.
Okay, now Olarawaju Rashid, flood can be managed by intervention of government by compelling people to build right. That is making sure that no one builds on waterways and by providing adequate drainage system where necessary.
All right, gentlemen, that's the much that we can take. We'd like to thank all our guests for being with us on the conversation segment. And we do hope that also the relevant authorities and the officers who've listened into this program would take the opportunity of noting the various proposals and issues raised by our guests. From Adamawa via Skype, we were joined by the Secretary to the Adamawa State Government, Dr. Omar Bindre. Omar Bindre, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Thanks a lot, and we wish you all the very best in bringing succor to victims of flood and flooding in your state. And also from Kaduna, we would like to thank our regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, Professor Emmanuel Adano. Professor Adano, thanks a lot. One point you raised, though, which we didn't have enough time to drill down into, namely how the managers of the various dams ought to release water ahead of heavy rainfall so that you know, the dams are better able to impound water in the course of the raining season. But always we appreciate your insights. Professor Adano from Kaduna. And here with us in the Abuja studios, deep thanks to Engineer Clement Unze. He's a director of the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency. Engineer Clement Unze, thanks a lot for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you.
All right. We also would like to thank Town Planner Umar Shuaibu, who is the coordinator of the Abuja Metropolitan Management Council. Thanks a lot for being around. And also our appreciation to the commissioner from Kogi State is in charge of environment and natural resources, Sanusi Usman Yahaya. Thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Our appreciation too to the acting director, relief and rehabilitation of NEMA, Kayode Fagbemi. Thank you for being with us. Let's go over now to our complimentary segments, and here is our sports desk.
Liberian President George Weah rewarded each player of the Super Eagles with a cash gift of $2,000 each for honoring his invitation for a friendly game to retire his Liberia number 14 jersey. The 1995 World Footballer of the Year was delighted that Nigeria presented a strong side, including several lost players from the recent Russia 2018 World Cup squad. George Weah, 51, now many kilograms overweight and far from being match fit, played for 79 minutes in the 2-1 defeat in the friendly encounter against the Super Eagles. The big striker during his playing days featured for some of Europe's best teams, including PSG, Monaco, AC Milan, and Chelsea. Meanwhile, the Premier League will test video assistant referee VAR technology across multiple games for the first time on Saturday. After VAR tests at individual fixtures last season, the Premier League now wants to see how the system copes with several games at the same time. A trial across 5 3 p.m. kickoffs will be at the central VAR hub. There will be no communication with anyone at the grounds at which the games are taking place. The trial limits the use of VAR to goals, penalty calls, direct red cards, and cases of potential mistaken identity. In April, Premier League clubs voted against introducing VAR for the 2018-2019 campaign.
Now that we want to go to weather, Kingsley, North Carolina is having a big heat at about now because of Hurricane Florence. And you see, it has affected our own brother's performance in the city called Raleigh in North Carolina. That's Davido, who was to play in that city over the weekend. All right, now let's return to Nigeria and get to the Meteorological Agency for more on weather outlook for the rest of today.
Hello, and welcome to the weather forecast for Friday from Nigerian Meteorological Agency. I am Akami Samarda. Thunderstorms are anticipated over the northeastern flank of the country, while partly cloudy conditions are anticipated over the northwest. Cloudy conditions to prevail over the central cities down to the inland of the southeast. Thunderstorms with rains are likely over the Mambila Plateau, Jalingo, Yola, Abuja, and the west of the inland in the morning. And by afternoon into evening hours, activities are likely over most part of the country, with thunderstorms over the north and the central cities. Rains are likely over the inland and the coastal states. I'll leave you with the temperature details. Thank you.
And that's a Good Morning Nigeria for today and for the week. We'll see you again on Monday for a fresh edition of the program. My name is Kyrian Umahi.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join Kyrian in thanking you for tuning in. We do hope that you have a lovely weekend. And before then, of course, enjoy the rest of your day.
Like say they want to tell us another story again, yo. Now so, say
the establishment of a China-Africa Trade Expo, provision of 1 billion RMB in food aid, as well as extra imports to China from Africa.
We will support Africa in achieving general food security by 2030. We will support Chinese companies in Africa to forge alliance of corporate social responsibilities. We will continue to strengthen cooperation with African countries in local currency settlement and make good use of the China-Africa Development Fund, the China-Africa Fund for Industrial Cooperation, and a special loan for the development of African SMEs.
Various speakers at the summit, including AU Chairman Paul Kagame of Rwanda and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, described the China-Africa cooperation as highly beneficial and need to be sustained.
China has proven to be a win-win partner and a sincere friend. We look forward to building on this solid foundation to reach the shared future of openness, prosperity, and peace that our peoples want and must have.
Together, China and Africa can unite their combined potential for peaceful, durable, equitable progress to the benefit of the whole humankind.
Records show that from 2000 to 2016, China has provided over $100 billion credit facility to Africa.
Thank you, Adamu. In a speech at the opening ceremony, Xi Jinping highlighted 8 major initiatives for future China-Africa cooperation: industrial promotion, infrastructure connectivity, trade facilitation, green development, capacity building, healthcare, people-to-people exchanges, and peace and security. Patricia Esemeluba is here with more insight.
The just concluded Beijing summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, which commenced Monday 3rd and Tuesday 4th September, adopted action agenda for China-Africa cooperation in the next 3 years or more. The Triennial Forum is focusing on a stronger China and Africa community. The summit had in attendance the Chinese President Xi Jinping as well as 53 member states of the African Union present to preview this friendship and discuss cooperation to elevate China-Africa comprehensive strategic and cooperative partnership to a new level. All parties agreed to work together to explore more efficient and practicable measures in promoting the cooperation between China and Africa. China is known for its huge manufacturing capacity, technology, as well as its capacity in industrialization. Hence, its relation with Africa is aimed at addressing development and challenges ranging from education and training to healthcare, tourism, infrastructure, development, and skills exchanges. Since it was proposed, the Belt and Road Initiative has become a new driving force for China-Africa economic cooperation, helping African countries with economic restructuring. This move has enabled Chinese investors to do business in Africa on a larger scale, with the belief that within the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative, African countries can learn from China's experience.
So we are serious about our commitment. And coming this time, I believe the new measures, new approaches, and new measures for China-Africa cooperation will be embodied in the Beijing Declaration and the Beijing Action Plan. And I should say, the substance will be in the keynote address of President Xi. We will try to summarize the good experience, the successful story, the successful practice we have already had between us.
Efforts are currently on to further improve on the business environment to strengthen China-Africa cooperation in terms of quality, efficiency, transformation, and upgrading. That is why 53 African member states took out time to join the summit. 9 countries have so far signed the Memorandum of Understanding with China, and 20 more countries have indicated interest to sign the cooperation agreement. Since the launch of the forum in 2000, China and Africa had striven to implement the declarations and follow-up action plans for the benefit of both countries. Now to Nigeria's partnership with China. The forum has resulted in the execution of vital infrastructure projects across the country, which is valued at over $5 billion in the last 3 years of the current administration. President Muhammadu Buhari disclosed this in Beijing at the FOCAC roundtable meeting, where he highlighted specific projects under FOCAC support, which has impressively addressed significant challenges in the areas of infrastructure, human capacity development, power, transport, agriculture, and humanitarian assistance. He further said Nigeria is leveraging China's funding to execute $3.4 billion worth of projects now at various stages of completion. These include the upgrading of airport terminals, the Lagos-Kano rail line, the Zungeru hydroelectric power project, and fiber cables for internet infrastructure. President Buhari, however, dispelled insinuations about the so-called death trap by Chinese government on developing countries, as he said Nigeria will be able to repay the loans. Chinese ambassador to Nigeria, Dr. Zhu Pengzhen, in an interview ahead of FOCAC, described the proposed work with Africa and other areas of concern as an opportunity to up the space for Africa's development and revitalization.
The FOCAC Beijing Action Plan, which will lay out new approaches and new deliverables of enhancing win-win cooperation between the two sides, with a particular focus on jointly building the Belt and the Road, the AU Agenda 2063, the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and will specify plans for future China-Africa cooperation across the board.
He spoke about the plans for China to further strengthen her relations with Nigeria in diverse areas.
President Buhari attended the last summit in Johannesburg in 2015, and President Buhari was the first African head of state who visited China after the FOCAC Johannesburg summit. So our two sides reached important consensus at the highest levels. And since then, I should say, China and Nigeria cooperation has entered a new phase of rapid development, new stage of rapid development.
The Chinese ambassador said Nigeria and China relations to a large extent can be said to have attained an enviable height and has become a pace setter for other developing nations. Hence, the need to sustain the momentum, scale up the heights of achievements, and refine the vision of the future of both countries.
Nigeria and China could better synergize its separate development strategies under the platform of FOCAC and under the platform of the Belt and Road. And as the title of my article said the other day, FOCAC, a major platform for China-Africa, for Belt and Road cooperation between China-Africa, between China and Nigeria.
Former Nigerian ambassador to France and Monaco, Ambassador Akin Fayomi, shed light on the relevance of the current relations between Nigeria and China, as well as what both countries stand to achieve in the long run.
Obviously, if Nigeria will not have anything to benefit from, President Buhari would not have taken that length journey all the way to Beijing. The mutual benefits are enormous, so it's not a one-way thing. Some people have heard it somewhere that China probably taking advantage, and some people saying no, it's Africa that is. I think both sides are taking advantages. Some of the infrastructure developments have been decaying for decades. Nobody wants to give us the loans to do them. China is even giving at some time, at some point in time, interest-free loans. Who won't jump at that? If I say give me 60 million and you say okay, take, you can pay back in 10 years, no interest. The West would never do that. The Americans would never do that. They are more capitalistic in nature. So everybody jumped on the bandwagon of China because it's to your mutual advantage. Many of the things I would have done long time ago, because if we had no money, oil prices went down and all that, the Chinese are now giving you the loans.
He said China has so far assisted Africa with $80 billion in loans between 2012 and 2015. Now, the recent commitment of $60 billion in aid, investment and credit facility with 8 major initiatives will further enhance socio-economic development across the continent. Ambassador Fayomi said beyond the signing of the MOUs, implementation is key.
The highlight is China, I'm putting down this amount of money, 60 billion. Africa, you have your list of things that we use this money for, and then we sign the MOU, and then the implementation is up to you, because sometimes we could be very slow. The money might not even, 60 billion is not a small amount of money. It might come in tranches. It's not as if they are just going to give a check of 60 billion. They are tied to projects. They've costed it that this project will cost 20 million, so it comes from this money. This one so across the continent, you can see that it's a lot of work. So in summary, it's a work in progress, but it's a good work in progress. Everybody has a chance to benefit.
He, however, advised the African Union to develop proper structures to harness these loans to meet the needs of member states and ensure proper monitoring of the funds. Though some critics are of the opinion that Africa is taking on huge Chinese debt, which member states may struggle to repay, with estimates ranging in the tens of billions of dollars, and could leave African nations with no choice but to hand over major stakes in strategic assets to China.
Nigeria is happy with what FOCAC is doing to Africa in general and to Nigeria in particular. There are pros and cons of any relationship. Even any business, there will be pros, there will be cons, advantages, disadvantages. There are some disadvantages. For instance, our people, our manufacturers are crying that the Chinese have dumped clothes here. No more textile industry in Nigeria. We used to have a very thriving one in Kaduna and Lagos. We don't have, because you just go to the market, Chinese clothes are all over the place. So they complain. But our government will say, look, these guys are helping us to build this railway that has not been there. Things will not be able to move freely. All this cattle rearing and heading and all that might even come to, because you'll be able to carry the cattle from the north down south if you have a viable railway system. And they are helping us to do that. Our airports are even graded as some of the worst in the world because of the terminals we have and all that. They are helping to upgrade virtually all the international airports. They are involved. So some people will say, fine, it might be like if they are imposing on us, but we are benefiting. So you can't, like I said, you can't have it perfectly smooth in any business. So as far as we feel that the agreements we are getting are moving us forward, then FOCAC will continue to be playing its role. And Nigeria will also continue to be part and parcel of FOCAC.
The Nigerian Television Authority News 24 channel, your dependable all-round news station, offering you world-class news programs, documentaries, spotlights, promos, and information highlights. Take advantage of our network reach and advertise your interest, goods and services with us. NTA News 24, first among equals with digital broadcasting. You can reach us on Channel 21 Terrestrial TV and Channel 101 on the StarTimes platform. For more inquiries, please call Coretta 0803 618 9986 or Henry on 0803 379 0884. Join us today.
The common trend throughout all FOCAC engagement is, I quote, making lives better for our people is what we aim to achieve in growing China-Africa relationship, Xi Jinping declared. So we need to make sure our cooperation delivers real benefits to us, both in China and Africa, end of quote. In our last report, Gabriel Odu had an interface with the people.
China is the second largest economy in the world and Africa's second largest trading partner. Given that China is also Nigeria's second largest trading partner with a tipped balance in China's favor, it is therefore incumbent on Nigeria to take advantage and focus more on infrastructural development.
One of the greatest problems Nigeria has is electricity. Solve the problem of electricity in this country, in 2 years, you will never imagine where you find this country, the height to which we will attain. You understand? Everything in Nigeria, everything is going for us. If you talk about free zone and others,
We have the raw materials, we have everything, solid minerals and everything that can be converted. But what is killing us is the cost of production, which is coming from the power sector. Also, China can aid us in transportation business. All this will assist in bringing down your products, the cost of your production. Because if roads are there, even if it means build and operate, then transfer at the end of the day, a Chinese firm can do it. Go to Hyderabad in India. Hyderabad in India, when I first visited the place, the airport was new. From the town to the airport, the long stretch of road, well tarred and everything, was done by a private company. Yeah. And they are making their money from the toll gate of the road and the tax you pay at the airport. The city is developed and they're making their money. Such things can come into the country. You understand? In fact, the area Nigeria should concentrate now is anything that can aid us in production. Because once you solve that problem, once you make Nigeria a production heaven, in parentheses, then you are now ready and super ready for the West African, for the African market.
Some Nigerians have aligned themselves with the position that no nation can develop on foreign aid and grants, but pragmatic and systematic approach to developmental challenges.
Before this loan is given, they must have done a proper homework. And we, who are the beneficiaries, we should also do proper and thorough homework to ensure that there is a strong safeguard. Otherwise, at the end of the day, they may end up controlling the economy, which may end up impoverishing Africans. So we must be careful. I share the views very well that they should come to Africa and set up their industries. However, Africa must, as a matter of urgency, try to ensure that they grab this technology and do it themselves. Otherwise, we will end up setting up a shell industry for foreigners to come and work. And at the end of the day, Nigerians will be the cleaners, the messengers, and have nothing to gain from them. So whatever strategy that we want to adopt, we must be the forerunners in driving such a policy, not allowing the foreigners to come and drive it here. There are some in countries like America, there are some industries or businesses that they will not allow foreigners to do. You ask a foreigner to come and operate your airport, you must first think about the security aspect of it. Don't forget, America in particular appeared to fall a victim of this kind of relationship in the past. And now the present regime is saying that, look, we must observe all the rules. And that's why you are hearing about the trade war in America and China. So we need to make sure the rules are not only observed, but from time to time, we review it to make sure Nigeria stands a better chance.
Others said Nigeria should also adopt China's soft power approach to fast-track development in culture and tourism.
China has put in so much into exporting their cultural resources into various parts of the world. They started even in the 1500 BCs and those years, ancient times, into India, into some other parts of Asia, and into Africa. They've been doing it for quite a very long time. They have the economic power to do it. They have the willpower to do it. They have the people willing to do it and people interested in doing it. The onus lies on us now to also put in our best to make sure that we also benefit in exporting our cultural resources, our tourism resources into China. But before we do all this, we need to develop all those things so that it will be marketable. the fact that you have a cultural resource or a tourism resource or you own it doesn't mean that it is marketable. You have to put it in a position or a situation whereby it is marketable to other people. The fact that I enjoy egusi soup, afang soup, banga soup doesn't make it very exciting to you until I put it in such a way that it will also be exciting to you. Have we put it in a situation where, or a state where it is exciting? Have we promoted it? Have we even told people that, look, these foods are even produced without all this so much fertilizers and things like that? I expect that they sign bilateral further agreements in such a way that Nigeria will benefit more from these relationships in terms of visa issues. Until about early August this year, people applying for Chinese visas, tourism per se, it was difficult to get tourist visas. But lately, I think they have tweaked it in such a way that it's easier now. And then visas on arrival, some countries do this thing. Ethiopia, Tunisia, Algeria, all these other countries, Morocco, Egypt, they have visa on arrival for tourists coming from China. I also expect the president to get into discussions whereby Nigerians are given better opportunities in China. News going around is that Nigerians are not given opportunities to work for a long time in China. For God's sake, if their people have to work here, our people also have to work there and in favorable conditions. And also, if companies of Chinese origin are established in Nigeria, we expect them to have good working conditions for Nigerians. Be they infrastructural related companies, be they cultural related companies, be they agricultural related companies, they should also give good opportunities and good conditions for Nigeria, not labor, not a slave labor type of conditions for Nigerians. Another thing is that Nigeria government officials need to look critically at most of these agreements and find out where we have to get additional advantage.
The Forum on Africa-China Cooperation is a strategic platform for Nigeria to really take advantage of in her pursuit for energy sufficiency, transportation, and many more.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's good to know China has always maintained that its model of engagement with Africa is win-win cooperation between equals. And that's the program this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Lydia Sampson.
Yes, it be like say they want to tell us another story again, yo. Now so, you know, say people they say I be superstar. But for me, the real superstars are those people where they go vote for the candidate of their choice without violence. So for these upcoming elections, be my superstar. Vote, no fights, no violence, because the election will be won. We work together so the future will be brighter.
Imagine a station where you access information. Think of a station that creates awareness for national development. Imagine a station that prepares you for a bright and greater future. A station for all ages. Documentaries, classroom and television, events coverage, children's programs and variety shows. Always stay tuned to NTA Knowledge on the StarTimes platform, channel 359. For partnership, sponsorship and advert placements, contact us on NTA Knowledge. NTA Knowledge, learning to broaden horizon.
Yes. Oh. Now my dirty they smell like this. Now to throw away am quick. This kind of smell fit make man sick. That woman throw away dirty for ground. Me sef, go do the same this time around.
Hold up.
See, to do this kind badness by the book, you make sure say person or they look. And then you drop them nicely, bros. Nothing will happen. Trust me.
See, if you throw away dirty for ground, another person says throw away dirty. Everybody can begin to throw away dirty for ground. Everywhere go call the smell. Gutter go block. Road go block. And you will like to the dab. And say no more dabbing for you, be that too. Dab, 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 dab. Yes.
NTA, you can't beat the rich.
Dab, 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 dab.
President Muhammadu Buhari appoints new Director General for the Department of State Service, DSS.
President Buhari directs Ministries of Education and Foreign Affairs to ensure no Nigerian student is stranded while studying abroad.
World leaders pay last respect to former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss the challenges of flooding and associated impact on the populace.
Flood has continued to wreak havoc in different parts of the country, claiming lives, destroying farmlands, and rendering many Nigerians in affected areas homeless.
For instance, the Niger State Emergency Management Agency only days ago revealed that about 40 persons lost their lives to various floods in 23 out of the 25 local government areas of the state, and all of that happened within the past 3 weeks.
Yes, Kinsley, you know, the story is not different further north of the country. Adamawa, precisely as the Adamawa State Emergency Management Agency also alerted the public that flood has killed 10 persons and displaced scores of others following the recent heavy rainfall recorded in this state.
Well, Kieran, we understand that hundreds of domestic animals, mostly cattle, were also lost to the floods in Adamawa and down south in the country. Edo State has not been spared from the rampaging floods and the devastating effects at some riverine communities in Esako Central Local Government area of the state, such as Anegbete, Udaba, Osemegbe, and Ofukpo, to mention a few, have been submerged as the River Niger tributary has overflowed its banks following torrential rainfall.
And Kinsley, we're beginning to hear some communities that are never on the news in the past, but now coming up because of this flood. Well, indeed, the Southeast equally has its share of the flood challenge in the country, as people in some communities in Nkanu East local government area of Enugu State reportedly now live in fear of possible flooding from heavy rainfall.
Now, as the saying goes, water naturally finds its course, and the scenarios that we have sketched above certainly are not new. Recall, for instance, the tragedy of 2012, when temporary jobs were created for persons in the Lokoja area who used canoes and other parties to ferry passengers across the flooded parts of the Abuja-Lokoja Highway.
All right, Kingsley, despite the casualties already recorded this year, is there any plan to evacuate Nigerians from flood-prone areas to avert further loss of lives and property? How prepared are the national and state emergency management agencies to mitigate the effects of flood disasters? What is the impact of town planning or misplanning in the spirit of flood challenges in Nigeria?
Now, very pertinent questions indeed, Kirian. Now, one may also ask, what is the disposition of the citizens living on the waterways to appeals by the authorities for them to relocate, especially with reports of the upsurge of the River Benue and the impending release of excess water from the Lagdo Dam in Cameroon? Well, these are some of the questions we shall seek to provide answers to from our guests in our conversation segment this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I welcome you to the program, reaching you as always live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, as the Nigerian Television Authority.
And I'm Kirian Umaya, also welcoming to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, the last for the week. Just to remind you that our usual companion segments will include newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. But first, let's take Good Morning News with Comfort Ahmad. Hello, Comfort. What comforting news do you have for us this morning?
Well, waking up this morning in good health is comforting. Good morning, Kirian and Kingsley. Here's the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari has approved with effect from the 14th of September the appointment of a new Director General for the Department of State Service. He is Yusuf Magaji Bichi, a core Secret Service operator. A statement by the Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity indicates that Mr. Bichi worked as the State Director of Security in Jigawa, Niger, Sokoto, and Abia states. He was at various times the Director of National Assembly Liaison National War College, National Headquarters in the Directorate of the Security Enforcement and Director State Service Academy. The new DSS boss, who is bringing skills and intelligence to bear on his new assignment, is a political science graduate from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, and received training in intelligence processing analysis, agent handling recruitment in the United Kingdom. And President Muhammadu Buhari has directed the Ministries of Education and Foreign Affairs to take necessary measures towards ensuring that henceforth no Nigerian students get stranded while pursuing education abroad. The President gave the directive while exchanging views with the new High Commissioner of Malaysia to Nigeria, Gloria Peter-Tiwit. President Buhari urged the two ministries to resolve all lingering problems and difficulties encountered by Nigerian students, not only in Malaysia, but other countries. And Governor Aminu Bello Masari of Katsina State has expressed appreciation to a group of young professionals under the auspices of Nigerian Consolidation Ambassadors Network for significantly contributing to the re-election bid of President Muhammadu Buhari by purchasing nomination form for him. Speaking to newsmen after an audience with the president, the governor said the gesture by the group clearly indicates the level of appreciation for President Buhari's leadership and the desire by the nation's majority for the Change Nigerian project to be consolidated.
The people of Kaduna are more than happy, ready and prepared to support President Muhammadu Buhari. They supported him since when he came out in 2003, and they have been consistent up to the elections of 2015. It was evident, and they are still consistent. Even last month's election has proved that APC was able to win overwhelmingly over the nearest opponent. So it's a clear testimony that the people of Kaduna are 100% behind President Muhammadu Buhari. And you know, in 2015, he got almost 1.5 million votes from Katsina State. So we expect by 2019, we'll be able to give him additional 1 million, making it nothing less than 2.5 million, inshallah.
The federal government is working towards strengthening the capacity of leaders, especially the religious leaders, to advocate and influence the joining of hands with government in setting the country firmly on the path of prosperity and progress. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo at a Religious Leaders Consultative Forum on harnessing demographic dividend for sustainable development in Nigeria, the role of Muslim of collective responsibility for building a better future for Nigeria.
Ladies and gentlemen, as religious leaders, you play very vital roles in the social, cultural, and economic lives of the people. You shape attitudes, opinions, and behaviors of large numbers of our people. And there is no real progress or transformation that can happen in any society, and our society in particular, without your participation, without your involvement, and without your endorsement.
The world on Thursday paid a glowing tribute to former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, as his remains were laid to rest in Accra, Ghana. President Muhammadu Buhari was represented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, as he led Nigerians' delegation to the funeral service.
Kofi Annan's first wife was Nigerian, and Mr. President has written to the family and to the President of Ghana and expressing how proud and grateful we were for all he achieved as a son of Africa and, of course, as a son of Ghana, and that he's achieved, well, not just for Africa, but really for the world.
In our time, Kofi Annan could bring people together, put them at ease, and unite them towards a common goal for our common humanity.
And with barely 9 days to the Osun governorship election, the Nigerian Police Force and other security agencies are collaborating with a view to stem out incidents of vote buying and other forms of criminalities during and after the election. The collaboration is to review progress against deployment of personnel to develop and collectively agree on deliverables and those responsible for them to enhance security management.
Of this election that we conducted, to our mind and assessment, there has been some improvement. We're not there yet, but something is happening, and we intend to demonstrate proper capability, ability, transparency in the coming election in Osun.
We know we are ready, but this is one of those processes we have to go through where we have all the stakeholders to come together so we can be speaking in one voice.
The inducement of voters by any form of material, either money or otherwise, is an offense.
Policing, security, all of that focuses around intelligence. That's the most important strategy that any security service needs to use.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has commended Nigerians' youth for their desire to contribute to nation building in their various constituencies through active involvement in politics, while calling on them to make needed sacrifices to ensure the ideals they want to see in the country are realized. The Vice President said this during a meeting with young aspirants under the All Progressives Congress, APC, at the Presidential Villa, Abuja.
Politics is evolving, and you need to bring in a lot of young people on board because, of course, you know that the youth are the future of the country.
Because of the philosophy of Mr. President, philosophy of the Vice President, philosophy of the APC, we will not put our hand in the government treasury to pick money, to take money and fund our election campaign.
Meanwhile, the People's Democratic Party says its ballot papers for the conduct of the presidential primary will carry the photographs of all the aspirants. National chairman of the party, Prince Uche Sekondo, stated this in Abuja when he hosted the European Union team headed by Bridget McUsen.
Jointly work together to strengthen also the process
the electoral process, the democratic process, the democratic institutions.
And that's the news highlight for now. Good Morning Nigeria will continue shortly with Kieran and Kinsley after this break. Do have a lovely day.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem frontally through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Reorganized, trained, and fully equipped, we are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime, we bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism, and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
Eshima. Mama. I'm out for food. Eshima, thank you, ma.
Amaka, ṣé wọ ni?
Soap, ori, shea butter.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Well, when I was growing up, it wasn't an easy thing for us because my parents were struggling. That's why when I started playing basketball, I need to play, I need to struggle, I need to achieve. I want to make something out of it. I graduated from the Milo Secondary School games to the senior league. Then they called me that I should come and play Junior World Cup qualifiers. Following here, I was invited to the senior national team. I've been awarded as the most valuable player 5 times. My teammates, they made it possible. Basketball, it gave me the opportunity to have my own basketball camp, giving back to the society. Because you know what you've passed through. I need to show the kids that basketball really changed my life. My name is Nkechi, and this is our journey.
Nestle, good food, good life.
Fake news which is shared for malicious purposes is a danger to our peace and security in Nigeria. Misinformation as fake news is a serious threat to our hard-earned democracy and promotes hatred and misunderstanding between our communities. We are all responsible for stopping the spread of fake news in its tracks. So, always check the source and credibility of any news item. Say no to fake news. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief.
Try new Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. New Nurofen Express works at the source of pain. Fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust.
Winning in hot and dry conditions is hard. Causes the body to sweat, which attracts germs that are easily passed from one person to another. What keeps you so cool, man? Dettol Cool combines Dettol's protection and an invincible icy feel. For super cool confidence, use Dettol Cool.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 Naira only.
All right, it's still Good Morning Nigeria, and we are live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now it's time for us to take some business stories, with the African Development Bank approving a policy on non-sovereign operations. Now, this is aimed at accelerating inclusive development through increased private sector funding. Let's have the details now with our correspondent, Joy Uzo.
Welcome to Business News. The African Development Bank has approved its policy on non-sovereign operations. Under the framework, the bank, through its private sector lending windows, will provide financing or investment without sovereign guarantees to private and public entities that meet specific eligibility requirements on non-concessional terms. The approval comes at a critical time when the bank is seeking to accelerate inclusive and sustainable economic growth through more private sector funding. Meanwhile, as the country intensifies efforts at diversifying our economy, given the discovery of crude oil by some countries in commercial quantities, stakeholders in the creative industry are of the opinion that they are not only one of the most rapidly growing economy of the world, but highly transformative in terms of income generation and job creation. The Director General, National Film and Video Censor Board, Adebayo Thomas, says with the creative industry rated third in terms of GDP contribution, with 34 cinemas in Nigeria realizing over 4 billion naira in 2017, the sector has the capacity of becoming the major export earner for the country.
And if only cinemas could generate 4.4 billion and above last year, we have not started counting the films, the CDs and co, and other sectors that is associated with the DVDs. So the multiplier effect of what we are talking is so huge that we have to look at it. That means we'll be looking at 6 to 7 point something billion Nigerian money that has been generated within the film industry alone. So we're very close to agriculture, and we're making it. And with the reforms coming, a lot of things have started happening.
And to the energy market, International Oil Benchmark extended its gains midweek as the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, in its monthly oil market report for September, disclosed that crude oil production from Nigeria rose to 1.71 million barrels per day in August from 1.53 million barrels recorded previously. Meanwhile, the International Energy Agency warned that oil prices could break out above $80 a barrel unless other producers act to offset deepening supply losses in Iran and Venezuela. Iranian crude exports are falling significantly before U.S. sanctions even took effect, the IEA said in its monthly report. While the agency warned that there is a risk to the 2019 outlook for demand from challenges in emerging markets such as currency depreciation and trade disputes, it kept forecasts for consumption unchanged. Now to stocks. Trading on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange continued its bearish sentiment as the all-share index depreciated by 0.84% to close at 32,022.23 basis points, valued at 3.7 billion naira with market capitalization at 11 trillion naira. Skybank, Unity Bank and Transcorp led the gainers stable, while WAPCO, Corn Oil and Cement Company of Northern Nigeria led the losers stable. Guarantee, Zenith and Skybanks were the most traded equities with a volume of 28 million, 25 million and 18 million, valued at 929 million naira, 514 million naira and 11 million naira. The stock market report concludes business news at this time. Many thanks for watching. I'm Joy Uzo.
And thank you, Joy, for that business package. Newspaper review is next.
time for us now to have our newspaper review, and Bayo Atoyebe is right here with us in the studios, as always, for the review session. Bayo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Kyrian.
Good morning, Bayo. Today we have about three papers to review, with, of course, the editorial. And here I have the Nigerian pilot. Let's begin with that. Just below the nameplate, 2019 elections, we are committed to credible poll, says INEC. The dozens of women held captive as herdsmen raised 3 villages in Adamawa. That's on page 7. And now the main headline on the Nigerian pilot, and that's Buhari sacks DSS DG Sefa with 3 riders, names Yusuf Bichi as replacement, gives no reason for his action. Southern Middle Belt leaders react. That story is on page 4. And now at the bottom of the Nigerian pilot, we have some stories there. Imo, police arrest suspected killers of a Catholic priest. Lecturer docked for alleged sodomy. Plot to impeach Saraki thickens. That's on page 9. And then defection. Dogara finished politically, says APC. And then 2019, NLC Labour Party reject Mimiko presidential ambition in crisis.
All right, I come to the New Telegraph. The New Telegraph story, that's the lead, is also on politics, but coming out of Lagos. The paper also focuses on the flooding in some parts of the country. Now, let's begin with the lead story, and the headline says, Tinubu adamant over Ambode, with a number of riders, governors, and Southwest leaders appeal to APC national leader, party leaders in marathon meetings, Buhari yet to wade in, traditional rulers pay solidarity visit to governor, and PDP woos governor. And take a look at the 4 photographs there on the front page of the New Telegraph. They are scenes from various flooded locations in Kogi and Delta states. Flood kills 55 in Niger, Adamawa, and Gombe. Thousands displaced in 7 states. NEMA orders evacuation in Anambra. Rice farmers lose 5 billion naira in Kano. And Kogi governor opens 33 camps. That can be found on page 6. Just below the nameplate of the New Telegraph, we'll have 2 headlines we are taking from there. Just below the nameplate of the New Telegraph, 2 headlines. 2019, Nigeria risks violent elections. That's according to USIP. Details on page 2. Buhari sacks Seifa as acting DSS boss. Southern leaders kick. Details of that story can be found also on page 4. And above the nameplate of the paper, pension administrators pay sacked workers 86.71 billion naira. Deceased families get 145 billion as death benefits.
Now, before Bayo comes in, Bayo, there's one story here that really struck me, the issue of the arrest of suspected killers of Catholic priests. In fact, down there in the east, you know, the people complain bitterly about the preponderance of killing of Catholic priests. That's about the 4th one within 1 month.
Yeah, you recall early in the week we discussed this issue, that it is becoming a recurring decimal, killing of clergymen. And the good news is that at least those who were involved in this latest one have been apprehended. But the security agencies must be up and doing to find out the link between criminality and the clergy. Be that as it may, the matter of concern now is the alarm about flood. Niger State has over 100 communities flooded, and this is not far-fetched. The Niger River is overflooding its banks, and we are still lucky. River Kainji Dam, Jeba Dam are all still retaining their water. By the time they open up their water, if the dam is overfilled, we are going to have a lot of problems. And that is why down the valley of the Niger up to the Niger Delta, there is already alarm about flood. The other danger also is that Lado Dam in the Cameroon, that also dams River Benue, there's been alarm over the week that any time from now, Lado Dam is going to open up because the dam is now overfilled. So all those who are lying in the low valley of River Benue, River Niger, this is the time to evacuate. If not, we are likely to have crisis, God forbid it. Talking about the report by Pilot is saying that Matthew Seyefa is sacked. That is wrong information. Matthew Seyefa was appointed in acting capacity in public service. When a director general is removed, vacuum is not allowed. Therefore, somebody is asked to act in that capacity. Usually, it is almost the most senior officer that is asked to fill in that void. However, subsequently, the appointing authority had the prerogative to appoint somebody to fill that position. So that is actually mixed information to say that Matthew Seyefa was sacked. That is not very correct. The other story that is trending is the alarm raised by the organized labor and has given federal government 14 days ultimatum to do something about the national minimum wage, or they cannot restrain labor from resorting to industrial action. They expressed concern over indication that the tripartite committee could adjourn indefinitely as indicated by the Honorable Minister. It may be recalled that in November, the federal government appointed a tripartite committee headed by a resourceful former head of service, Ama Pepple, and they were expected by August or September to turn in the report. Labour is threatening that the Minister of Information of Labour and Employment is indicating that they have adjourned indefinitely, and Labour says they can no longer wait impatient. However, the Nigerian Tribune has another slight to the story. It says that the National Economic Consultative Association has cut its 42,000 proposed as minimum wage to 25,000. The Minister, Chris Ngege, who revealed this, says that while he was reacting to the 14-day ultimatum given by Labour, Minister says that as chairman, and he himself and the chairman of the committee, Ms. Ama Pepple, will meet the president today and present the latest position to government. The minister said all aspects of minimum wage has been completed except the fixing of the amount, and he indicated that Labour earlier has submitted a sum of 56,000 and later upgraded it to 65,000. The National Economic Council brought 42,000 and later on reduced it to 25,000. This is what is being awaited now is the consolidated economic situation. In other words, the federal government will now have to consult with state government before they will now negotiate and agree. Minister of Labour is saying that Labour is blackmailing him by declaring that, giving a 14 days ultimatum to go on strike. So the minimum wage is a big contention.
It's a big, well, there's no doubt about that. Some months ago, Bayo, if you recall, when the issue came up, yes, the Labour indicated what its preference would be as a minimum wage, but we did say that there were other parties that were involved. And that you will have to negotiate and convince the other parties to agree. And there must also be a consideration for the capacity to pay. Because we have various scenarios played out in different parts of the countries of states and local governments owing their workers.
Well, it's continuing. The owing of workers in many states, it has continued actually. The capacity to pay is a real issue. Not just to reach out.
There is a dilemma here. The 18,500 take-home pay cannot take the worker home. Everybody agrees that there is a need to review. Even at 18,500, many states are not able to pay.
All right, let's go to the Punch newspaper so quickly and get the main headline on the Punch newspaper. APC governorship candidate Tinubu adamant about decision on Ambode, page 2, has that story. With the rider, Lagos can't continue to be in Tinubu's pocket, says group. And below that is a photograph of Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan, who was actually honored yesterday in Ghana. Obasanjo, Saraki, world leaders bid Kofi Annan farewell. That's on page 14. And now below that, we have Oshu begins payment of salary arrears, pensions, with 19.8 billion naira. That's on page 43. Just as let's say, Oshu has just started paying arrears of salaries.
Yes.
Right. And of course, Kano Emirate Council suspends 5 village healths for insubordination. It's on page 8. All right. And, well, let's go to the...
yeah, well, Bayo, you have any story there? The editorial is, of course, it's from the Nigerian Pilot newspaper, and it's at page 3 with the headline, Resurgence of Restructuring Debate. It says, from all indications, restructuring or devolution of power will play a crucial role in the 2019 electioneering campaign. Now, the paper adds that a situation where all tiers of government depend on the sharing of monthly allocation from Abuja should end, and that the government should ensure that it doesn't continue to maintain a studied silence on what it refers to as the feeding bottle federalism.
Well, before we go to this editorial, 3 African heads of state joined the surviving Ghanaian head of state to pay their last respect to Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan was former Secretary General of the United Nations. He was buried with full military honors in a private ceremony. United Nations Secretary General had a tribute to pay to Kofi Annan. He said Kofi Annan was UN and UN was Kofi Annan. President Akufo-Addo called him an international icon who represented Ghana, Africa, and humanity very well. His wife, Mani Maria, said, "Thank you to Ghana for giving her beloved Kofi to the world." Not many people know, in fact, that Kofi Annan's first wife was a Nigerian, and the Nigerian delegation was led by Foreign Minister and former heads of state Olusegun Obasanjo and General Abubakar Abdusalami were also in attendance. Now, talking about...
Not forget in a hurry the decision Kofi Annan made when the UN nominated him to be their rep during the initial period of Syrian crisis. He withdrew, believing that it's not going to work. And it has not worked up to today. It's a smart decision he made at that time.
Yes, I agree with you.
And interestingly, the current president of Ghana, that's Nana Akufo-Addo, his first wife also was Nigerian. It is Nigerian.
Nigerian.
Okay, to the editorial.
Yes, editorial. Editorial is about restructuring. Well, this has been an ongoing debate. There are several dimensions to restructuring, but this editorial is emphasizing what it has described as feeding bottle federalism. That is a situation where states, local government will depend quarterly upon the stipends from the federal government. And that is one aspect of the restructuring. There are other concerns about physical restructuring and other which have generated debate. But take note, every time there is election coming ahead, restructure will always be...
And people have not made it clear. Like, Chrisley, we had that discussion sometime last week, where we would say, is it going to be fiscal, geographical, or economical? And the proponents of the restructuring, none has been able to bring up a template, that one could start looking at to determine whether it's a possibility, for now in Nigeria.
In other words, restructuring is a political campaign topic.
Okay. All right. Well, at that point, we are going to conclude this segment of a newspaper review on Good Morning Nigeria. I would like to thank Bayo Toyebi, as usual, for being part of it this morning. Thank you, Bayo.
Thank you.
We are going to see you on Monday.
By the way, I'm sorry, we missed this, but that's the end of the newspaper review. When you take a look at the front page of the Punch newspaper, the photograph there, will tell you part of the activities for the funeral of the late Kofi Annan. He was given a state burial. Yes. Because you could see his casket there was born in a gun carriage.
That's 17 gun salute.
Yes, that's what you get. All right, Bayo, as you've been signed off by Kirian, thanks a lot for being here. We hope you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you too.
All right, so it's still Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break. Now, when we return, of course, we'll be dealing with flood and flooding in various parts of the country.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
Hello Nigeria, I am Becky Madujemu. Welcome to Newsline. The people of Ekiti State went to the polls Saturday to elect a governor. We have the scoop of what happened in a major town in that state after one of the contestants was declared winner. Another location we intend to visit, also in the first part, is a popular ghetto in Lagos. It's a mixed grill of interesting people, and you'll be left with several impressions. Our movement will also see us in Jigawa State. Would you believe there is a place where the people party every night? I'm not talking about the regular party we are familiar with. The nightly affair is actually a tradition. Now, talking about tradition, two historical women were remembered by two first-class traditional rulers in their respective domains. Very colorful events not to be missed. We also have great stories in between. But let's hear the news first by Lydia Ochi. Over to you, Lydia.
Thank you, Becky. 2018 FIFA World Cup ends in glory for France in a 6-goal thriller. Ayodeji Makinde has the World Cup update. Many thanks, Ayodeji. And now back home, former Minister of Mines and Steel Development, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, has been declared winner of the Ekiti governorship election. This was announced by the INEC returning officer, Professor Idowu Olainka. Timothy Yusuf has more.
In the result announced by the chief returning officer, the APC candidate Dr. Kayode Fayemi polled 197,400.
Is seeking the cooperation of political parties, the public and security agencies towards putting a stop to votes buying and selling during election. INEC chairman Mahmoud Yakubu said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Ogarian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern part of the country. Typhoon Makhout has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Service of the NTA.
Stigmatization on women who are in politics. Natasha, you're new in the game, but I know that Adachege here, it's an old guru. How do you deal with a lot of times? Anyway, let's just spill it. Some people think women who are in politics do the dirty deal. You know, they are no longer women. They don't care for their homes and all that. How I've seen your children. I've seen your son. You can be one of them actually. Yeah. So how did you manage to build your home? I still want to know. And are those stigmas really correct?
No, they just the make believe. They're just that thing that they throw there to make sure the woman shies away and run far away from the political front. But for real, it depends on that particular woman. It just like in the case of the male counterpart, it's from one man to the other, their behaviors. So also is the women. But this particular notion you just
say this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Ogarian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern part of the country. Typhoon Makhalt has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
This is the network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Ogarian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern part of the country. Typhoon Makhout has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern parts of the country. Typhoon Makhout has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculation, speculations. There is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern part of the country. Typhoon Makhout has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern parts of the country. Typhoon Makhout has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern parts of the country. Typhoon Makhout has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern part of the country. Typhoon Makhalt has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Ogarian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern part of the country. Typhoon Makhout has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Ogarian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern parts of the country. Typhoon Makhalt has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern parts of the country. Typhoon Makhalt has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern parts of the country. Typhoon Makhalt has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern part of the country. Typhoon Makhalt has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern part of the country. Typhoon Makhut has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari, Molunti, Kukawa, and Muguno. And away from security, strategies for effective implementation of African free trade is in focus as ECOWAS Parliament continues its seminar in Côte d'Ivoire, Abuja. The African Continental Free Trade Area is as a result of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement among all 55 members of the African Union. It ratified it will make Africa the largest free trade area in terms of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. The seminar by the ECOWAS Parliament will brainstorm the challenges and prospects of the trade in Africa and the strategies for its implementation. And on news across the globe, more than 2,000 prisoners have been given a presidential pardon in Rwanda, including a top opposition figure. Report says Victoria Ingabire has been serving a 15-year prison sentence for threatening state security and belittling 1994 genocide. She has been a leading critic of President Paul Kagame and says her trial was politically motivated. Mr. Kagame has won praise for reforming Rwanda's economy, but has also been accused of human rights abuses. In Philippines, at least 2 people have died after a massive storm brought destruction to the northern part of the country. Typhoon Makhout has ripped through the Philippines' main island of Luzon and is now moving west towards China. A government official says almost all buildings in the city of Tuguegarao sustained some damages and communicators were down in places. More than 4 million people were in path of the storm. And those are the stories we have for you on the hour. Thank you for watching.
Network service of the NTA.
Kubo said this at a dialogue organized by the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. The INEC boss used the forum to assure Nigerians of a successful 2019 election where votes and only votes shall determine who wins election. Gudumbali in Guzamala local government area, an Nigerian community in northern Borno, is about 250 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, and about 25 kilometers from Niger. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is there to interact with troops. The people of the community inspect army camps and formation after the recent Boko Haram attack. Some members of Gudumbali community interviewed explained that contrary to speculations, there is peace in the town as only camps were targeted by the terrorists and no civilian was killed. Addressing journalists after a tour of Gudumbali, General Buratai noted that the army will not be deterred in the quest to protect the nation's territory against internal and external attacks. The operation tour also covered army units and formations in Zari,